It wasn't a terrible walk. I walked home.
I'm fully bundled, but it's still cold. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the weekly weather report. Now this is the My Friend's Studio Basement podcast. My Friend's Basement Studio podcast. Sorry. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the My Friend's Basement Studio podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about our business, My Friend's Basement Studio, a podcast studio located in Brooklyn, New York. I'm Maxim.
I'm Connor. This week we'll be talking about actually something someone suggested in the comments in one of our videos on YouTube. We've talked a lot about our business. We've talked about our growth, some of the things you need to do to the struggles about podcasting, the work that goes into it. But this person suggested that we talk about the why you should podcast. Which is a great point to be like, you should talk about why people should use your business.
We really made a show that was like, podcasting is so hard.
And it's also to say, like, if you have ideas, email us, questions, comments, we'll respond to all that stuff.
MyFriendsBasement@gmail.com.
MyFriendsBasementStudio@gmail.com. My Friend's Basement Studio on all of the social media. And yeah, if we sound a little scattered. We just talked about our budget for 2 hours.
Oh my God.
We talked about redesigning our studio space.
No wonder I'm so hungry.
And well, let's get into.
All right, let's start with lessons learned for the week. You got one?
We got one new segment too. We'll do it right somewhere.
After. Maybe early?
I think earlier than later.
All right, we'll do it after this one. First segment
is lessons learned. Lessons learned this week. I'd say, a lot of my free mental space has been going to burnout, to where I've been burnt out a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm learning my capacities and what I can't do. And I've been very committed to the idea of head down until March. I feel like March is the first 3 months of the year. We'll see how things have grown. We'll see what's working. We'll see what's not, and then kind of reevaluate. But I'm learning, I think there are more important things than the things I'm doing right now. I'm cutting a lot of clips. I really want to get our social media figured out, our own branding presence figured out by the time March rolls around, or by the end of March, definitely. But taking my own advice from past episodes, is it best for me to be cutting all these clips, doing it all ourselves? Or is it better to try and build for the brand to go out and try and build connections with other businesses to spread word of mouth? If I'm in the basement all day editing clips, who is out there talking about the business? And there's no two better people to talk about the business than us.
It's me. I'm talking about the business. Well, I know the comedians.
Well, you are, but you think about though, we have our network of people we know, and these are the people. We have the two sides of the business, right? We have the clients that are coming in, and then the brands, the in-house stuff that we'll eventually make and release. Guest host coming out sometime. I'm hoping for the beginning of March. Those people, the comedians we know, might help rent the space. They're the ones that create the content. Very, very important to that side of the rental space. But in terms of the branding and potential reach, if we go to one publication company that wants to write a story on us, that's way more than what we could do in weeks of word of mouth.
Yeah.
So lessons learned is a little bit more abstract than normal. But the idea is, if I'm spending all my time doing X that someone else can do, when there are Y things that no one else can do or only we can do,
right?
That's what I should be doing.
Yeah.
But there's this we have a constraint with our budget with certain things where things are going. And so it's where's the compromise of balance between I still need to do this until we've hit X point because we're not going to spend more than X money, but still having enough space to not be burnt out and really go and do things that move the needle that only you and I can do.
Right.
And it's not lessons learned.
Your lessons learned is pick your battles.
Well, lessons learning.
Lessons learning.
Because I'm in the middle of it and I'm like sensing like, all right, this path of just grind it out and make a ton of content, clips, focus on that. Yeah, it's helpful and it still needs to be done, but is there a smarter way to do it that frees me up to do more things that move the needles more effectively?
Makes sense. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Good thing to think about. My lessons learned for the week is this is not the tech tip, but this is like a small piece. If you are recording onto a recorder and you are not releasing weekly, when you create files, you should organize them as soon as you get them. Right. So
that's a great tip.
So my wife has been recording a couple podcasts independently not at the studio, but with my like Zoom H6 recorder. And
great equipment for quick recording.
Highly recommend. But I told her that outside of the studio business, I will clean one podcast of her choice for her. It can be one of her shows, doesn't matter. And I'll do all the episodes. But I just got to the point where we were trying to collect all the episodes in one spot. And two things happened. My Zoom recorder filled up after 3 years.
Yeah.
It finally happened.
I've had that.
So the reason what was happening is now we have this backlog of files and none of them are named because it's saved in a Zoom recorder. So it's just the date that it happened basically with an index number. And she had to go back through all of her text messages to figure out what days they recorded on or what days they record. There was 2 podcasts and there was probably 6 episodes of both that are like in different spots. So it's better. It's when you record a podcast, when the session is over, take those files off, put them in your hard drive, on your computer, wherever it goes, label it with the date and which guest you had, make it very clear so you don't have to do that work later of like solving the mystery of where the files are.
So a few things just occurred to me. One, I just figured out what this show is.
Okay.
Okay, because we were like hybrid, we're talking about stuff that's helpful, we're talking about our business. I think there should just be a section of like, if you have a question on any of this stuff, like hopefully we grow people's knowledge of the show, ask us, we will discuss it here. We'll problem solve for you. I think one section, because our next section, we're going to be talking about tech talk. If you have any technical questions, I think we should just kind of make it a little bit more interactive in that way.
Yeah. So drop your questions in the comments or email us.
Yes. Lessons learned, that whole idea. I think that'd be really fun and more useful for the community because now it's, we have our story, but we're getting more established.
Yeah.
So how can we help?
Right.
What is the value add for people? So that was a side. Idea. But the other thing I remembered, and I'm sure you know this too, our very first time we met to talk about podcasting. And do you remember the first thing I taught you about podcasting?
The file structure.
File structure is number one. It's so, and I've been in that situation. My story behind this, I worked in college radio. I worked in college radio for several years, a year and a half. So several months, 18 months or so. But I took over, basically there was no structure to it. And I would, we had 3 hours of content that we could fill every week, pre-edited. But a lot of times, and if something didn't get put into our automation system, it would just play music. So there was a fail safe if things didn't go out. And a lot of times before I was there, we didn't have enough content. So just turn to music. But I was like, well, we should fill this. We have time to just create stuff. So a lot of times I would assign people to do things, but then they'd have class and then they'd be like, hey, I didn't get this done. It's supposed to be done by X time, 3 hours or so. Can you do it for me? And I spent 90 minutes of that 3-hour window to finish editing something. Because these were highly edited. This wasn't just like the clean we do, but like cut everything. Because there's certain FCC rules that you got to make sure you're covering. I would spend so much time and so much energy looking for things. I don't know who taught me. It was probably our engineer. We had this engineer, Ali, who built the studio. We had a brand new studio at the University of Oregon 2 recording booths, 2 on-air booths, beautiful. And maybe if he didn't teach me, he deserves a ton of credit for teaching me other stuff. But Ali, I think, sat me down and was like, this is how I do it. Year, period, month, period, day, period, all numbers, underscore, name of the show. And then underneath, and so I guess we'd have top folders.
Yeah.
Show, every episode, year, month, day, name of the show, and then probably a topic, an indicator to give you a little bit more clue. And we separate it by underscores. This is exactly how we do it at the studio. But and then that automatically organizes everything else. And in Google Drive, when I worked at Oregon Public Broadcasting, for their just show notes, they organize it in the exact same way, a structure that automatically organizes it. And I've been in that situation, but then add on, this needs to be done in 20 minutes or 2 hours.
Yeah.
And go find it. And you're just scratching your head being like, this is complete gibberish.
Yeah.
That's stored in here. That's like an automatic numbering system. It's a pain in the ass.
On top of that, so it's 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, underscore show name, right? So you'll have, for every recording, you have a big list of these, and it automatically alphabetizes in numerical order because of the year and the month and the day.
Add the zeros. Add the zeros.
Always do 2-digit day and month. But when you go in that, we do raw, edit, and export as the next 3 folders.
Yes.
Raw is all of your raw recordings, raw videos, raw audio. Edit is where you keep all your like Audition or Premiere project files, basically, for your audio and your video editing process. And your export only contains the final products. I do one additionally on my podcast where I do raw, edit, export as the top level, and that's all audio. Then I do a video folder which has raw, edit, export, and then it's like clip and thumbnail, like additional organization. But the big one is if you separate the work in progress stuff from you have the raw stuff, work in progress, and final. Separate those within your date folder structure. Very clean.
And our next segment was going to be tech talk, but this feels like a lot of it. Maybe we'll throw in 1 or 2 things very tech specific, but the organization, very first conversation, I was like, this is the first thing you need to know about it. And that's how much it traumatized me to be like, before you have any fun, learn this. And you've used it. We've always used it.
I teach it to I literally taught it to people at my regular job this week. And they were like, that's a good idea.
I started in radio. I taught you about that. And then we use it now. And we don't need to go too deep into this. Maybe we'll talk more about it some other time, but we have it's incredibly important to organize your files in that way because it keeps things easy to discover. But also, if you use Adobe products, all of their files work by linking. They use file links. So if you move a file from a folder during the editing process, it will unlink in your software, especially if you're using Premiere or After Effects. And then you need to go and bind it. And your window will pop up saying these files are missing. And if you don't remember where you stored it, you're fucked.
Yeah.
And so for us, we use this structure, but we have save everything initially on the Creative Cloud. And then we have a SSD, solid state drive, to store all of the kind of not somewhat current episodes, kind of a backlog of sorts, of current backlogs. Yeah. And then we have a third 8 terabyte hard drive with a deep storage of everything. But if you go through all of those places have the exact same file structure. And because that's the case, and we actually I create thumbnail folders, or like folder that says specifically for the templates, Premiere, all the logos, all the branding, everything in there. All of those places also have those files. So if you open up a project in any stored place, all organized the same way, you can access all of the files so they are linked correctly, and you can work off of any of them at any given point.
Yeah.
And it takes time to organize things that way, but We have to do it once. And honestly, if we didn't have that, we would have never started this business.
Yeah.
Like we would have folded after 4 clients. We would have been fucked.
Yeah. So the fundamental lesson there is just have a good folder structure. Do your organization right the first time.
Yeah.
It'll save you a lot of hassle, a lot of headache later.
Yes. Yeah.
So, but the official next segment after lessons learned is tech tips.
Tech tips. Yeah.
I'll do a quick one. Starting out, unless you are doing remote recording, do not use USB microphones. And I've seen this question pop up a lot on like the subreddit or various other podcast discussion places. And it's just, I'm going to say it too, is like if you have one computer that you're using as the recorder and you have a USB hub and 4 USB microphones plugged in there, it's going to be miserable. The timing gets weird. It's all different. You want XLR microphones and you want to get an audio interface. You can even get a small one that plugs into your USB port.
H4, Zoom H4.
The Zoom H4 does. The Zoom H6 can also do it. But just doing that and then plugging into your computer, if you're using the computer as the recorder, it will save you so much headache. Like you want that XLR output. You don't want an encoded USB output.
Yes.
That's my quick one.
Yeah. I think the Zoom H6, any of the Zooms where the XLR plugins goes to the flash, flash drive? I'm not flash drive. The
SD card.
SD card. Take that out right away. I think that's really helpful. I don't know if it's so much tech. Maybe I think I've set up. I should have come more prepared. I knew this was a new segment, but that was a really good tip. And then I got real deep into file storage.
Okay, I'll let you think about that for a second while I drop the next tech tip on you.
Great.
Okay. For cameras specifically, I don't know if you'll need this, but there are different tiers of SD card. And when you have, they have different write speeds and copy speeds. So make sure when you're using your equipment, you pick something that matches the file transfer speed you're going to need. Doesn't matter so much with audio because audio is not that data intensive. But if you were recording on a video camera or something, you want to make sure you go for the nice SD card.
I'm going to piggyback off your tech tip. It's not going to be completely new. But I liked what you said about buying the XLR microphones. And I want to add on, I think you should buy something that's you should buy the equipment you buy for podcasting should be one level higher than you think you would accept. And then buy it right the first time. I bought a Zoom H6 when I was right after I graduated college, I think it was right around that time. And I have used that. We used that for our first podcast. It cost $300 at the time. But if you're looking at, that's been 4 years. If you spread that cost across 4 years, it's very cheap. And I can see that thing working until 2 decades from now, potentially.
Yeah.
And so if you're looking at microphones, you're looking at any type of equipment. If you're committed to this podcasting, these microphones, no matter what happens with this studio, we will be able to use them on our future projects. Audio equipment does not age fast.
Yeah.
The technology doesn't move super fast, especially at the consumer listening level like we're at. So if you spend a little bit of money for a little bit better quality rather than buying a USB microphone, like you said in your tip, you could end up buying 5 or 6 USB microphones because their quality isn't great, but you're still trying to stay in a cheap budget. And before long, if you buy 3 microphones at $160, at $60, you spend $180 versus buying one nice $150 microphone. You've technically saved money, saving the planet.
And I will say the USB mic thing, if you are remote recording, like you are using like Riverside FM, or there was another one that we saw that's like Squadcast, like those, where it's you are the only person at your computer and you are recording and everyone else is on their own station. USB mic is fine. Like I use the Shure SM-V7. This is the SM-7B.
Yeah.
I have a Shure SM 7V.
Yeah, there's a variance.
But it has the XLR input as well as a USB-C input, and that I just plug into my laptop. It works amazingly, but that one has the option. So typically in person, always XLR. If you're just talking into Zoom or your webcam or whatever, you're probably fine with a USB mic. Maybe a streaming setup you want to go XLR to, but that can be a bit further down the line.
Mapping and all that stuff. There's a whole right. There's a course.
The buy it right the first time mentality. The first time you explained that to me, I was like, it actually makes a lot of sense. Like when I have the speakers we use for comedy shows, right?
Yeah.
You can cheap out and get a cheap speaker, or you can get a nice speaker, and that speaker will last you forever. Like I've used my speaker. I mean, those speakers we buy are like $600 a piece, and I use mine every single week at a comedy show for a whole year. And I used it for countless other mics in my backyard, and I've loaned it to people, and I just give them the crash course and like, hey, don't fucking drop it, but here's how the knobs work. And it's a great speaker, great battery life.
The AV space is expensive to get into, but I think as long as you're not buying top end and have no idea how to use it, it's usually better to pay more. I don't know. I feel like
pay more for it. And if you don't want to pay more, check Craigslist, see if someone's got an old one lying around.
I mean, I think my feeling is tech tip. We'll need to figure out where to place that, because once we get rolling on some of these subjects, we can just go
do the whole episode. Yeah.
And like you're watching back through them, it's like, oh, we're 20 minutes in before covering the subject of
here we go. The subject. What do we like about a podcast studio?
Well, not only the studio, but podcast. Why podcast is basically the subject of it. And we've talked about it loosely, but really we're thinking about the pros, the benefits. There are people trust me, I hear about it on dating apps. People are like, podcast studio. Oh, you one of those podcast guys. There's a stereotype around podcasts that dictates a certain type of people.
As there should be.
But I guess we're looking at let's maybe work our way down in terms of like what you're looking to get out of it. Say you're just a person, you're not a comedian. Forget that you're a comedian for a minute.
I think
why podcast?
The highest level, because I even wanted to start a podcast before I started comedy. And at the top level, I think what it is creating long form media for average people is very daunting. So most people cannot write a book.
Talking about the positive stuff.
No,
I know.
So most people cannot make a movie or write a 90-minute movie script, or they can't the average person, if you want to do a 1-hour comedy special, that's 10 years of work to get there, Podcasting, one thing I like about it is it's a long form medium that anybody can do. There's tons of creativity you can do with it. There's so many options how you can put things together, what the show format can be, how you edit, all these other things. And at the end of the day, it's still very accessible. The big barrier to entry for podcasting is the technical expertise and the time invested to do whatever you want to do. But if you really want to do it, you can just do it. Like if I wasn't a comedian, I didn't have this podcast business, and I was just working my day job and I wanted to have a podcast, I could really sink a lot of time into making a crazy good podcast. But fundamentally, I love creating stuff that will last a long time. And I like making large volume, long length content regularly that doesn't feel like it consumes all of my energy.
Yeah, you hit on a point that I wasn't even thinking about within terms of like the artistic release.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just scratches an itch for certain people. My first thought, my first reason why I really liked podcasting was the democratization of media.
Yeah.
We had a segment talking about spending a little bit more on your equipment, which I still think if you're invested in the space, you can do, but you could start a podcast tomorrow with your phone and that's it.
Yep.
And that is like that idea that anyone can access it. It's similar to YouTube. Anyone can upload there. I think is really freeing. You can do a lot with a little.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I can put this out in front of other people. My ideas out in front of other people with not a lot of know-how and no money.
Yeah.
That was really the initial appeal to me.
Mm-hmm.
If you're digging down the rabbit hole, which I suggest we don't go down, does that mean everyone should have a podcast? No, but
Probably not.
yeah, there's certain people.
The amount of clips on TikTok from podcasts that are terrible, where people are like, another excruciating watch. They
Yeah.
just let everybody buy microphones.
See, I just wish
now.
someone would comment on our stuff. But the idea is like, if you have an itch, it can be scratched very easily. So that's
Yeah.
top level. Let's say people at our level, there's people who are building a brand as an entertainer or as a creator in general. It doesn't necessarily need to be comedy. It's just easy to talk about comedy because that's what we do.
Yeah.
But why comedy? What is the benefits? And I think maybe at the end of it, because we're talking more, not technical is the wrong word, but more like more concrete stuff. I think in general, let's end on the idea of like why we were drawn to it.
Mhm.
More
Okay.
tangential stuff. But
Yeah.
let's say you're building a brand. You're starting to build a brand, or you want to advance your career in some way.
Mhm.
Why might a podcast be helpful?
I think a huge thing about podcasting is like connecting with a community at large. It sounds crazy because I know the listeners listen to mega-sized podcasts often, where they're one of 10 million fans who listen every day, and it doesn't feel like there's a community there, but there definitely is. And also, like, as a podcast creator, like, for like my main podcast, Don't Quit Your Day Job, while very small, is still a podcast in our specific community where I interview people that people we know, and it's like they're upcoming comedians who are all going to be fucking amazing one day and do cool stuff. And I keep it for a record for myself, but also other people listen to that podcast, say, oh, they have their interview is on this, like, Don't Quit Your Day Job. I'm going to go listen to that to learn more about them,
Yeah.
And then I have people come up to me who are like, oh, I listened to your episode with this person. That was really great. You guys did some really great stuff. And it's like, awesome. The next step is like my Condom Review podcast. I literally, right before this, I got a piece of listener mail that was very kind and very excited from a person who's writing in from the first time. And I was like, that's dope. If I get to create something that other people see and are like, oh, I'm happy with this, I look forward to it every week, it's very fulfilling. So
yeah, the community piece is a great aspect. I think we're now in a world, if you're a creator, you're building a brand, we're in an age where you need content, you need clips. As we touched on before, it's one of the most accessible. And now that there's video podcasts are becoming more and more popular, the accessibility, YouTube and then getting on Spotify is both very easy. So it's an easy way to create content, easy in quotes. Like, you think about a TV show, how much planning, how many people, this you can sit down and do whenever. So that's still helpful for building a brand. But I think if we zoom in on comedians or even content creators, micro content is becoming very popular. And I like to think of podcast as a top-down funnel, where it's like, all right, you have the full, or a bit largest to smallest funnel. But even though consumers consume it the other way, but that's a whole different thing. So you have the podcast, you create a podcast in full, you release it, and then you can go through, you can cut long YouTube clips. I love the Pat McAfee show. I think what they do is brilliant. They have a 3-hour live stream every day. It's usually a little bit longer. Then they cut the best sections, and then those videos get views because they're really relevant to the community or a certain event. And then you go even further down, and you can create reels, you can create TikToks, you can create whatever. So you put in whatever work you put into the podcast, and then it all just trickles down. You can keep reusing and reusing content in a way that's pretty efficient and get in front of people in different ways. If you zoom in a little bit on comedy, though, so many comedians in particular, we're learning we got to put out content. But there's this concept where if you put out a clip of you doing stand-up, you've burnt the material.
Yeah.
Burning the material means people have seen it before they've seen it live. So that means when they see it live, it's not going to be as funny because comedy has diminishing returns. It's a whole different conversation. But if you have a podcast and you're creating clips from that, you don't need to always rely on your stand-up
Right.
for content, but you can still be doing funny things in a way that feeds the algorithms but does not burn material. So I think it's pretty strategic to have in your pocket as a young comedian. So you only have 10 minutes and you're going to try and put out a clip every week. You're just always going to be burning material and always in this constant churn that's just not healthy.
Yeah.
For good material.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, it's a great content farm.
Absolutely. It really is. You grow your brand. Like people can get to know you more, exactly like you said, build the community.
That's like the biggest thing. I think with a lot like big comedians, right? Like you have like
next group of people. Why is that for them? But yeah.
But like, you know, you have like the Bill Burrs and the Burt Kreischers and Tom Segura and people like this, Kevin Hart. People will see them live maybe once every other year if they're big fans, you know, or maybe most likely they're just waiting for the next Netflix special to come out. They watch the special and like, I really like that guy, but I wish I had more. They always have that content, that podcast to fall back on. And also there's a certain, in the podcast realm of what we typically do, there's a certain like genuineness about the content that I really love about podcasting. Cause it's like, you're going to have an hour and a half long conversation with someone. You're not going to be in character for that. You're just going to do the conversation with people. The listeners get to actually know you, see what your mannerisms are like off stage, off screen, you know. It's very, there's a lot of podcasting is about the truth, man.
Well, yeah, I think I want to touch on bigger people and then touch on some of the stuff that you just mentioned, because I think bigger comedians or bigger celebrity.
Yeah.
Everyone, I watch a ton of Shark Tank. So much Shark Tank. I love it. I think it's really fun. It's educational. There's so many questions that I have from it that I'm starting to answer through this business. But if you look at the sharks now, a lot of their pitches are, like when they're like competing with each other, they have bids. Mark Cuban often comes out in front in a lot of those. And it's in part because his personal brand reaches so many more people. Like, if I saw a random clip of, and this is nothing against any of those people, but like, Barbara, right?
Yeah.
Great. Love Barbara. Her responses to some pitches are hilarious, but I would more often than not listen to Mark Cuban in part because of some of the clout that he has, but I've seen over the years, all the sharks start to pivot to doing more and more of this content outreach.
Yeah.
How can you tell the story of a product to your customer, to your audience, and get it in front of more people? Kevin O'Leary's does a lot of stuff on YouTube now. It's kind of interesting to see. And he'll even make that in his pitch. He's like, I'll go out, I'll tell the story of this product. And podcasts are a fantastic way to do that. And comedians use it to sell tickets. They talk about their life, but I know I've heard Mark Norman. I didn't hear Mark Norman talk about it, but I heard someone talk about Mark Norman talking about it, that the podcast makes X amount of money, but the real money comes from what he's selling through it, which is tickets.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a great middle step.
Yeah, it is. And it's one of the things that it can kind of be likened to is countries. They talk about countries having cultural exports.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is, but for people and brands, you know, like you, and also podcast listeners, we know this, podcast listeners, they be listening. Like if you have a fan on your podcast, like some weeks you might have a higher spike than others, but you see over time, it's like, oh, I have the same 50 people listening every week. Like I know I'm going to get 50. And those people are super into whatever you're going to say. You know, you have that loyal audience base with this many people. And it just grows over time, grows slowly and steadily, but you can really find your tribe and establish your brand and guide people to other things through that. So,
yeah. And then for me, you brought up something, it's kind of more big picture. why people why podcast, but that fly on the wall nature.
Yeah.
Like, it is a conversation. It's an insight. Audio is a very intimate medium. We have podcasts here. We've talked about Danielle not using video. If you're audio only, that's super intimate.
Yeah.
Fireside chats. Was that FDR had the fireside chats, talking with a country, stuff like that. Like, audio has played a role historically in that, with that intimacy, gaining trust.
Yeah.
And you get to see people in ways that you wouldn't, and just be genuine with an audience about your thoughts.
Yeah.
That you can't, there's not a lot of other mediums built for that where it's actually effective. If someone did that in a movie or a TV show, we would all turn it off because we're supposed to be entertained. But podcasting has this larger, more long listener tolerant community.
Yes. That's really great. I think that's part of why like audio dramas are so successful, is because you have the listeners who are already like, I'll listen to fucking 50 hours of an audiobook. I'll listen to 8 hours of a podcast. No problem.
Yeah.
I also think like the why podcasting part of it is also like, I podcast, like, one, for me, because I love it. I love connecting with people. Two, I know people out there are just working jobs. They're driving places. They're on the train. They're just in Microsoft Excel all day, or maybe they're out doing some construction work, or whatever your job may be. We have to work to live. But when you're working, a lot of times you can just zone out and listen to a podcast and consume something you enjoy while you do something you may not be actively enjoying, you know?
Yeah.
And this is not to say that if you work in any type of hazardous job or with any heavy machinery that you should have your earbuds in, but that's
specifically who I want our listener base to be.
Ooh, the heavy machinery podcast.
Only listen at work, please.
Only listen at work. You should only listen to this podcast in situations where you would not want to be drunk.
And you have no intent of building a podcast.
There you go. Yeah, so I don't know. It's like, it's one of those things where it's like I meet with my gaming group every other Monday. We get together, we play this game. Love it. We talk on our Discord about it, but sometimes I want more content. I'll go watch YouTube videos, and there's people who make like long ass YouTube videos where they just discuss the game or tactics or the storyline or stuff. And it's like, that's nice, because then it gives me more to look forward to when I actually go get to experience with the group about the things.
Yeah.
So I think honestly, like, podcasting is for everyone, and just putting like, if you're someone, no matter what your hobby is, no matter what your interest is, or the thing you want to talk about is, you put in a little bit of upfront effort to make a good quality, good sounding, kind of learn a little bit of audio editing, get some good equipment, make sure the show is good and consistent. If you put that out in the right spots, you're making their days better. You know, when you get those listeners who are ready to listen to your show, you just made, like, you gave one person an hour and a half where they felt like, cool, I'm listening to something I enjoy. Or like, you made that person who was folding their laundry, they get to enjoy it a little bit more now, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's good stuff.
What about you?
Why do I podcast?
Yeah. Besides all like the weird business Shark Tank reasons.
No, that's it. That's always been my first podcast. It turned out to be well, but I really was like, I want to capitalize on this segment of that's not being discussed. Good News, a podcast was my first podcast. The intent was to do the middle of news. News happens on the poles. Very good, the very bad. Someone came into my class and said, if whoever figures out how to talk about news between those two poles will become a very rich person. I went, I might as well try that out.
Yeah, I said without the Shark Tank business reasons.
That's I mean, this is
Mark Cuban stormed into my college lecture and said, "Whoever can do good news."
It was, I don't know. I've always, I feel like it's been a pretty risk-free environment to try stuff out.
Totally.
I've always liked audio. I learned how to edit video through editing audio. We don't do a lot of it now. It's just not the form we do. But all the cutting stuff that you see when I cut S&D clips, all of that stuff, that precision, that listening, making sure every blend is right, all of it comes from audio editing when I was at the radio station. And all that stuff was really bad at the start. But there was something really satisfying, and I've talked about it in the past, but like work is my coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And it came at the right time, and I really enjoyed it, and I still enjoy sitting down and doing that editing stuff. And so I honestly, podcasting is probably the best space, because I like scripting, I like writing, all that other stuff. There's so many pieces, but I can still sit down and come up with a story beginning to end on my own.
Yeah.
No one needs, it's like, it's the same as stand up.
Mhm.
There's a lot of parallels where I get to write it, I get to perform it, and I get to hear the feedback myself and incorporate it myself. It's the same exact thing with a podcast. You can do it all yourself if you wanted to, because that's the way the medium is set up.
Yeah.
You can have full autonomy of a creative project if you want. There's other ways where you don't need it. And I think depending on your goals, it's smart to think about those other things. But if you want and you're really dedicated to it, you can have full control of a creative project. Video wise,
It's very freeing too.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the things, making a long form piece of media, but also you get to be in control of all of it, and it can be good at the end of it. It's nice.
One of the reasons I zoned out in there for a second when I was thinking, I thought of the most insane podcast
Yeah.
episode for us to potentially do.
Okay.
It's Mr. Beast style. Of course,
Mr. Beast style.
50. So we sit here and we do 50 podcasting tips going back and forth.
Okay, that's not hard.
And we have the whiteboard and we always write it down to keep track. And then it becomes the lore. Remember rule number or tip number X? And we just create a big list of it.
I was going to say, I tweeted once, Mr. Beast needs to pay someone to do a 24-hour podcast, and that person should be me. But I learned last week, okay, I did 2 Don't Quit Your Day Job episodes in one day, and then I went home and smoked a cigar in the evening, and I was sick until yesterday. I mean, not good for your throat to talk that long.
We did 10, yeah, the stuff he does. But I like the idea of like building a lore. We could even do 100 tips. I don't think it would take that long, but I do think we would get to like maybe 40 and then start to struggle. Like, no, that's technically in this tip. It would be interesting. I'm not saying do it next. I just think about the clickbait on that. 50 podcasting tips, and it's just us going back and forth.
Well, I could probably do 50.
I think we could get it. I think that's a reasonable number. Maybe we start with 25, and then if it seems too easy.
If it's audio only though, audio only podcast
video,
tips,
it's got to be chaotic on the screen.
Audio only podcast tips, I could do 25. But audio plus video podcast universe stuff,
I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, we could do that.
Maybe, yeah, at some point. So one thing before we get into the highlights of the week, I would just want to say, we've talked about commenting and stuff. The meeting we had, the budget meeting, we just talked about redesigning the space.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be in the studio at least until the end of my next lease, so the end of the year. We're talking about aesthetic, and if you have any thoughts on aesthetic, friends, first time listener, whatever, send us a comment.
Yeah,
if you have like insights, we're trying
to redesign like the space you're looking at, and we want to change it up, but we want to get a unified aesthetic for stuff before we start investing. So whatever it might be, if you guys have a vibe or like other podcasts you like the aesthetic of, not even just exactly their setup, but like how their studio looks, let us know in the comments. We'll take a look at it.
Absolutely. I really like the idea. This is more I know podcasts usually one way, but if we get it 2-way, that'd be sweet. That'd be a lot of fun.
Getting the 2-way going is excellent.
Yes.
Love it.
All right. Highlights
for the week. Oh man, it's been kind of a chill week for podcasting. I'd say bringing people down here. I brought someone down here last week who was like, whoa.
So it was a good feeling.
So that's a great one, the classic. And then let's see what else. I had that's pretty much it. Nothing too big. It's been kind of quiet. I mean, other highlights, we got some more prospects for coming in. Business always on the horizon, which is good. So
yeah, I'd say it's a slow week. We just talked about expectations for February, and I think we're seeing some New Year's resolution burnouts or New Year hype burnout, which is fine. But I think last week someone came in and I guess it fits with the aesthetic, but they were sitting on the couch, which is off screen that if you've watched other podcasts that have been here, you might have seen, including You Don't Have to Be Here. The couch is used by Danielle's podcast for audio only, and across from it is this cow shirt that I made for Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And when their episode ended, the guest, JJ Matisse, very good comic, great. I think it's going to be a fantastic episode for Female Intern. The JJ was like, I've been staring at this cow shirt the whole time, like trying to figure out what it is. And I've pitched this idea. I've told you off screen. I've told this to other people, but I really like this idea. I think it's very funny. And this has nothing to do. I've alluded to exes and stuff on the podcast. This isn't the space to talk about it. And this is not a shot at anyone or anything. I just think it's a funny concept because a lot of my comedy revolves around dating stories, exes. But my good friend Mo, who gave us some art to start filling up the space, gave us something that their ex had made them. My girlfriend at the time gave me art and I put it up, and I've been thinking as we had troubles, like, do I take it down or what? And I was just like, it would be really funny if we made it like a tribute to all of the ex stuff. So many people have stuff from ex. You're married, so come on, you're out of that ex game. There's so much stuff and emotional baggage, and I think it's really funny. So to loop back to the cow shirt,
yeah,
I made that request to my ex, and so now I have another painting, a drawing that someone made of me right after I broke up.
So your highlight is adding to the Museum of X.
So JJ, I told JJ that idea, and I've told a few other people, and JJ was like, that's hilarious. I'm like, that is exactly what I need to hear. This is gonna happen. You got old clothes for exes, you got artwork, anything. We're like the Goodwill of getting rid of your ex stuff. You drop your emotional baggage here, we will repurpose it into art. We are not upselling, upcycling. I don't know. I mean, it would just be cool to have the whole other place filled with art, but I feel like a lot of people don't want to part with art. But if it's like something emotional tie that you're looking to get rid of, this is where you reclaim it. I'm big into reclaiming stuff. But JJ was like, that's funny. I was like, that's all I need to hear to keep this idea alive.
Well, I'm glad you got validated. I think it's a terrible idea. And I don't like it. This aesthetic should have no emotional baggage.
I think I'm just going to start putting up like the old love letters. I would never do that. No, it's again, not a show. I just think it's a funny idea. And like, there's a lot of creative people in New York.
Yeah.
And a lot of people like, oh, my ex, I've heard from friends like ex is making stuff and just like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, that'd be cool. There's a lot of good artists. A lot of the art, like we got also compliments on the art for being good pieces. So if we can get art and help people emotionally in the way I need help.
Nice.
That's a high.
And we'll end it there. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Email us aesthetic tips, things you want help with, whatever you're thinking.
In the YouTube.
You can comment in the YouTube. You can DM us.
At My Friend's Basement Studio.
My Friend's Basement Studio. My Friend's Basement Studio at gmail.com. Hit us up.
MyFriendsBasement.studio website.
Go check out our website. But yeah. Aesthetic. We're looking for tips on aesthetic for the studio. We're looking for what you want help with on your podcast.
Tech tips for you.
We'll give you tech tips. We'll talk about it.
And
X is art.
And if you really want us to see us do 100 podcast tips in one go with a whiteboard behind us and Maxim nodding just like that,
I'll do it.
Half an hour into this idea. Let us know. That'd be sick. That'd be so funny.
But thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, all the above.
Bye.
Bye.